Welcome back to Consider This. Melisa and Sharaad here with you this evening. Now, we're asking you once again to reconsider your assumptions about yet another very difficult, very divisive issue tonight, the death penalty. Abdul Helmi Abdul Halim is a Malaysian on death row in Singapore's Changi prison. 2 years ago, he had been sentenced to death for trafficking diamorphine. He was scheduled to be hanged at dawn on Friday. Now, joining us on the line right now to discuss the current case is N. Surendran, Advisor for Lawyers for Liberty. Surendran, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, you've represented Malaysians on death row, Malaysian death row inmates in Singapore previously. You have accused the Singapore government of double standards when it comes to targeting Malaysians charged with drug trafficking for execution. Can you give us an update, Surendran, of the current case?
Yes. Helmi is a Johorian. He's 36 years old. He's married with children. And the particularly unusual aspect of this case is that he was convicted for trafficking in only 16.56 grams of diamorphine, which has got a street name heroin. So that is, I've never come across a case in which someone is being is supposed to be hanged for an amount as low as 16 grams. The minimum is 15 grams. And of course, he has maintained throughout the trial that he did not know that he had been carrying prohibited drugs. And despite that, of course, he was convicted.
But can you explain to us, I mean, does the law allow the Singaporean authorities to, convict him and sentence him to death for that amount? I mean, is it... are they going beyond the law in this regard, or you just think it's unusual because the amount is so close to the as it were, the minimum?
They've not gone beyond the letter of the law because 15 grams is the minimum. But there is a prosecutorial discretion not to charge when the amount is so small. Imagine hanging a man over 16 grams when we've seen tons of drugs being impounded or seized and nobody gets charged. And yet a low-level drug mule is going to be hanged for 16 grams. That's why we say that this case is unusual and it's quite shocking, really.
Can you give us a sense, Surendran, of a comparison between the narcotics laws in Singapore versus in Malaysia and the rest of the region?
Well, the narcotics law in Singapore, of course, are enforced are much stricter, but in many aspects it is quite similar to what we have in Malaysia. But of course, I think Malaysia has come to the realization that there's a problem in executing human beings for drug crimes where no element of violence is involved. And there's a moratorium that has been in place in Malaysia for quite some time. And the new government is committed to abolishing the death penalty for drug offences. But that's not the case. In Singapore, we see an escalation or an increase in cases, and many of them involve Malaysians. The largest number of drug offenders on death row in Malaysia, in Singapore, in Singapore's Changi prison, are Malaysians.
So
that's a matter of great concern. Yeah.
Did Helmi get a fair trial?
We say he did not, for the very simple reason that the members of the government in Singapore, including the Home Minister, have gone on record many times making statements that clearly target Malaysians. Now, I don't want to disparage the judicial system of another country, but it is well known that no one seriously thinks that Singapore has got an independent judicial system. And where members of the government make statements like this, we worry whether our citizens could have got a fair trial. It seems unlikely. And let's not forget that the rate of conviction in Singapore for drug offences are extremely high, unusually high, and clearly a product of a judicial process that is not entirely independent.
Yeah. Surendran, in the past, many attempts to campaign on behalf of convicted felons, Malaysians or otherwise, to avoid the death penalty. The appeals have been on the basis of clemency and, basic human dignity. These have fallen on deaf ears. I mean, is it in some ways counterproductive to mount a campaign to save people? I mean, is there another way to actually save somebody, perhaps less antagonistic or kind of frontal and confrontational?
Well, we've tried over the years. I think every method has been tried. Asking them nicely or pleading with them has unfortunately never worked. There have been many memorandums, petitions, everything has been tried. But unfortunately, Singapore has been stubborn about this. And whereas other countries are moving away from it, particularly here, home in Malaysia, we find our citizens have to face this kind of treatment abroad. And let's not forget that the UN has come out repeatedly and said that executing people for drug crimes amounts to unlawful killing. Malaysia has taken note of it, but Singapore is just not listening. That's our concern, and we don't see any other way except to strongly campaign against continued executions of drug offenders.
Surendran, is there any other? Is there a next course of action, another recourse for Helmi?
Well, it is certainly an uphill task because the execution is scheduled for Friday. In previous cases, we have managed to stop it, as in April in Panir Selvan's case. But as difficult as it may be and as uphill as it may be, we feel that we have to try and save every human life if we can. It's an absolute good to save a life, and it's an absolute evil to take it away.
Do you think you have the Malaysian public on your side in this regard? There are a lot of people who say that a convicted felon is a convicted felon, and they seem to have no sympathy for particularly people who are labeled under the drug charges.
Certainly, there are differing views and a split when it comes to the death penalty. But I think a lot of people sympathize, particularly when you're talking about low-level drug mules. A lot of people understand that the drug kingpins are laughing all the way to the bank when the poor drug mules who get paid a pittance for doing what they do get hanged. So I think we sense that there is a great deal of sympathy and understanding, particularly since our government is moving away from it. And previously, even our government ministers, even the Prime Minister in the case of Michael Garing, came out pleading for his life. There is a change in the attitude of Malaysians. We sense that.
Thank you so much for speaking with us this evening. That's all the
you.
time we have on the show tonight. I'm Melisa Idris, with me, Sharaad, Kuttan. We will be back with you same time tomorrow night for another episode of Consider This. Thank you for watching and good night.